as I request the panel to join us, I know Deepak will not be able to join us. He's got to go and seek additional investment. That's no problem. Deepak, please carry on. If I could please request Dominic Ascott, Andrew Cohen from the Manchester India Partnership, Jim Bly from TCS, Kishore from Rolls-Royce, Felicity Burch, who was the moderator of the panel just before, from CBI, and that's it. To please join me up here. I'm glad at least the names are marked. You know, usually when you call people up, everybody looks at you and says, yeah, where do I go? Or how close to you should I be? I think, let me make a couple of opening comments. You know, as a firm that spends a lot of our time on culture, I want to give you a couple of things on culture before we go into this subject. The first one is the culture of accountability. Something we talk about at our firm. It's up to you all what you want to get out of this discussion and what you take back from here. And therefore, one starting point there could be to consider putting your smartphones on airplane mode. You also have a choice to keep looking at your smartphone and dealing with those emails, but then you will perhaps blame the panel on what you did not get out of this session. I think and we call that the culture of being here now versus something else. And you know, in the Indian culture, most of us would be familiar with that concept of mindfulness. I think I obviously have the privilege to host this panel. We've been producing the India Meets Britain tracker that actually tracks all those Indian investments into the UK for the last 4 or 5 years. You know, there's 800 companies, some of the statistics that Dominic quoted. This year, along with the CBI, we had the privilege to also produce the Sterling Assets Britain Meets India tracker. So the reverse of that, also tracking, what British companies are doing in India. Also, some of the amazing work that's happening on this corridor, and I think we launched that yesterday. There are copies available for you to have to look at that. But we've seen that relationship evolve over the last 20, 25 years when we first started working on that corridor. It's been very, very interesting on acquisitions, on listings, and on business expansion. Let me get straight into the panel. And our Prime Minister Modi called the existence of this living bridge between our countries. Dominic, you had mentioned in your opening comments about the prospects for working together. What are the complementarities? Why is India so important to the UK in this tech partnership?
There's a solid base, as I mentioned, there's a solid base on which to start from. So besides the 1/3 of Indian companies, the 800 Indian companies in the UK being involved in tech, telecoms, I think it's about 1 in 5 of the 400 or so UK companies here in India are involved in tech and life sciences. So a really good basis of a foundation for collaboration. There is unquestionably an attraction and importance that India presents for any partner in the world, which is in the tech side, which is just size and volume, in terms of putting into practice or testing out some of the technologies. You speed up that process in all sorts of sectors immeasurably if you're collaborating with India. There's a third, sort of not wholly monetizable issue, but I think a really important one, which we've been trying to make a theme, have made a theme of today, which is the thought leadership point. There are really difficult regulatory, policy, ethical questions that you have to address. And UK and India share a value system and a respect for the rule of law and for the requirement to have properly regulated technology or new tech, for which there is not, in many cases, not an agreed framework. And what we can do together to set the standards, I think, is essential.
Thank you. And I think if we could move to you, Andrew, and you represent the Manchester-India partnership. This is a partnership between a city and a country. Yeah. Can you talk a little bit about what this partnership may be about?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the Manchester-India partnership is the culmination of about 4 years' work. And if you go back 4 years, the city developed an internationalisation strategy, which was refreshed at that point. And what we recognised were key international trading partners that we needed to have stronger links with. And we identified at that point the huge potential of India and what we could deliver if we forged stronger links. So what we created about 12 months ago was a public-private sector partnership. And the reason it's public and private sector companies, my day job is the CEO of Manchester Airport. So we needed people from business to be part of a joint working forum with the city and the city region. So we launched it about 12 months ago, and the idea is that we're trying to drive trade, investment, forge closer collaboration, as we heard earlier, with educational establishments to drive research and development, and also tourism, which is really important as well. And I think one of the key elements of it is about raising the profile and uncluttering some of the landscape. So we work with lots of organisations. We work with DIT, we work with the CBI, we work with Visit Britain, all the people who are attending here. And part of it is trying to facilitate that joined up approach. So when people are struggling to start up a business, they don't have great big corporate affairs teams, they don't have necessarily the resources, and if we can facilitate that can become very powerful. And I think what's fundamental for us is the fact that we've got people on the ground in India as well, as part of that public-private sector partnership. So we've got people based in Bangalore, we've got people based here in Delhi, we've got people based in Mumbai, and I think that's really powerful for us. We've also developed really strong links with initiatives like the Deloitte Fast 50. And we've provided soft landings into Manchester for companies who are setting up there. So companies like 42 Gears or people like Mobisys, who I'm sure you've heard of. And our sectors are very clear, and they are symbiotic with India. So sectors like digital, and tech, really important to us. Lots of capability in our region with that. Health, advanced manufacturing and energy are also key sectors that we want to collaborate on. So I think all in all, we've been going a year, we're making good progress. The other part of our role is about generating connectivity. As an airport CEO, that's really important. We've launched a new route about 5 weeks ago into Mumbai, which is really successful. I think the final point I'd make is it's about trying to remove barriers as well. Yep. So things like making visas easier to get for students or for people coming to work bilaterally, that's the sort of thing that we want to help promote.
So you've got presence on the ground in India, in various cities. Yeah. We'll come back and discuss why should Indian companies consider Manchester and the Northern Powerhouse when they look at the UK as an option. But we come back and talk about that. I'm sure people here would consider that. Felicity, I should probably started with you, and I don't think I've done as well as you did, on your panel. It was wonderful to hear that discussion about diversity and inclusion. But what's the role technology can play in facilitating diversity and inclusion and pushing that forward? Yeah. Yes.
Thank you, and I think that panel before did really illustrate just how important technology can be in facilitating inclusion. And I think that there's two really key ways in which it can do that, and one is through enabling people. So back in the UK, my team includes looking after a trade association for the sharing economy, and there's some brilliant examples from that sector of the economy in terms of how technology makes entrepreneurship easier for people who perhaps wouldn't have considered it previously. So in the UK, 60% of people who host people using Airbnb are women. really turning on its head a lot of statistics about women and technology. But it can also enable people in all sorts of aspects of their lives, looking at things like, we've spoken a lot this morning about access to mobile phones, and mobile phones can open up bank accounts for people, but also enabling women in rural areas to have access to midwives throughout their pregnancies, and enabling safer, healthier pregnancies and health for those babies right from the start of their lives, which is just absolutely incredible, and something that wouldn't have even been possible 10 years ago. And I think that movement that we've seen already is something that we should be really excited about, because the future with technology in that respect will only continue to improve. But it's not just about enabling us as individuals. I think that there's a lot that technology can do to enable firms to be better employers in terms of diversity. And there's a couple of areas there as well that we can look at. So even if it's just looking at things like working from home, that becomes a lot easier if you have a good internet connection and decent technology. But also in your recruitment processes. So I was talking to one woman who found it very difficult to get into a coding role because of her gender, and she felt like she was being discriminated against. And then when she went through blind automated recruitment processes, turned out she was one of the top coders, and she got a job, and she's now doing really brilliantly. So technology can open up all sorts of opportunities for people. But it's not the only tool, and it does have to be part of a wider package of measures, which was something we really explored in the last session. Diversity starts at home, and it starts from a young age.
Thank you. Yes, I think what was really interesting in that panel was it's about changing perceptions and how people at home need to start working on those perceptions. You need to start, not necessarily pushing your sons towards STEM and your daughters towards arts. It was very interesting to hear at least one panelist talk about how her kids have exactly the opposite preference. I think, moving on, Kishore, you worked with multinationals who've made use of that R&D potential in India for years, if not decades. You worked with a US multinational, and now with a, of course, UK multinational, and particularly, all those companies have been very successful with sort of co-creating, opportunities. Can you talk a little bit about some examples of that co-creation? How Rolls-Royce is right now making use of, working together to make use of that R&D opportunity that Deepak talked about, where India is the number one, R&D hub in the world now outside headquarters.
Okay. Yeah, thanks, Vishesh. It's interesting. I worked only for technology companies. So sitting here in this technology FutureTech session is like a privilege and an honor for me, because it's been 30 years of my career. And when I look at it, India always looks at it and has adopted technologies that have been developed elsewhere. India has gone into a phase where they have started to develop their own technologies, but not enough in my view. And I think for the spaces that Rolls-Royce participate in, civil aerospace, defense, or in power systems, these technologies have a very high entry barrier. And countries that develop the technology hold on to them for generations. They're not decades, they are probably centuries. And India has the capability, which you have seen firsthand, with Rolls-Royce building over 1,000 people in India today. We support 3,000 people with outsourcing, but we have 1,000 of our own people. Our supply chain has grown over to £500 million of commitments. So we have 2 joint ventures in this country. So it's not a question of the capability that exists, but it's always a question of what do we do next? And how do we become that technology inventor, innovator, that is made in India? Not only made in India from manufacturing, that's created in India. And that concept led us to say that if countries like India need security, whether it's energy security or defense security, they have to have IP. They have to create strong IP bases that will enable them to take these technologies, build it in India, and export them overseas. And we find India has the capability. What we believe can enhance or sort of bring out that capability is programs. If you look at any developed economy, US, UK, Germany, any country, you will notice that there are programs created by the government. The programs created by the government enable these new technologies. And I think India is at a phase where we don't have to reinvent the wheel. We can work with companies and governments globally with UK, and we have the capability to build that technology together. The next generation technology can come from India. We co-create a product, especially in defense aerospace. We have engines capability. BAE has the aircraft technologies. It is possible that we could create the next generation aircraft out of India. And it is not a dream anymore. It is a very clear possibility. It's just a question of investments. It's a question of capabilities that will be generated. And I think together we can build that product. It's much easier from aerospace. If you go down into other areas, it's a lot easier. If you go to the power systems business, you could create the hybrid engines that will be in India. Why should we be in diesel and say that we're going to go to LNG? Why don't we go from diesel over to electric? And we talk about data. We talked a lot about data this morning. There's an unbelievable amount of data available in India. And if those data are channeled properly, if the processes are there, the policies are there, it only enables us to build that next generation products. And we are a firm believer at Rolls-Royce that India will be a country where we will co-create a product for the future.
Thank you. It's just like it's wonderful to see an Indian representing Rolls-Royce on this panel. It is also wonderful to see an Englishman representing TCS on this panel. And actually, it's even better to see a partnership between the Tatas and Rolls-Royce already being in place. So Jim, can you talk a little bit about that partnership, and a little bit about what you've seen on this corridor?
Sure. TCS, just so you know, many of you will know TCS and be aware of what we do here in India, but also around the world. I joined TCS 3 years ago. We had about 8,500 employees. Today, we've got more than 17,000 employees, and we're growing incredibly quickly. The reason for that is because the UK market is so rich and so strong in the diversity and depth of the companies and the businesses that we have. There is a huge appetite for digital transformation and a huge appetite for the IT services that we and our competitors will provide. And we see it as a very, very rich market. And one of the companies that is an exemplar, I think, of the strength of the FTSE 100 and the strength of Britain's biggest businesses is Rolls-Royce. And we've worked together for many, many years and developing various different technological solutions and doing some of the more basic BPO type stuff as well. But I think what's really exciting is the very large new partnership that we announced earlier this year here in India, where we're working on an IoT Internet of Things system. So in order to minimize engine downtime, we're effectively installing thousands of sensors into every engine. So as your aeroplane is flying from Delhi to London, you can see in real time what's going on with the engine, whether it needs fixing, what particularly will need fixing when it lands. So you minimize that downtime from potentially days into potentially hours. We do that through a system called a digital twin. So we basically build a digital replica of the engine that that Rolls-Royce will be looking to service at the other end. What this does is it enables Rolls-Royce to minimize that downtime, enables planes to fly more often, but also I think enables you to offer a different service line yourself in terms of the products you offer to other customers for you. So we're both providing, I think, with each other, for each other, but also providing for that broader supply chain that Rolls-Royce has and TCS has too. I hope, Kishore, that accurately reflects the partnership that we have. Excellent, good.
So there is some co-creation already happening. I think I was amazed to read, and it's actually covered in this CBI Grant Thornton Sterling Assets report that I mentioned earlier, is how Indian companies are partnering with academia in the UK. Partnering with universities. Tata Steel, for example, has partnered with I think the University of Sheffield to develop a new generation steel, and there's several examples in there which were unique. I thought. Of course, there's B2B partnerships, but I think that's certainly one area where there should be a huge amount of potential. Dominic, is that something you're hearing more about? I know India's not fully open to overseas universities starting to come here for academics, but that ought to be an opportunity.
Massive opportunity. They come, I think it's Swansea, maybe as well as Sheffield, but I've certainly had Swansea who are doing stuff with Tata Steel. Very innovative stuff. And I can't go around the country, and I have luckily, lots of excuse to travel around India since we have 7 deputy high commissions. And I've committed myself when I arrived 3 years ago to see them every 6 months. So I spent quite a lot of time on the move. I cannot go to any one of those centers that we have outside Delhi without coming across something. This is the living bridge you were talking about right at the beginning, without coming across an example with no government agency involved in it. So it's not us as a British government doing it. It is institutions and companies working together on common opportunities, common challenges, wherever I go, whether it's neurological sciences up in Calcutta to prosthetics in Bangalore, you name it. There is nowhere which something isn't exciting going on, which is why I'm so keen when we get into pairing up ecosystems in different bits of the country, where the Manchester participation here is so important. It's finding those congruences, similarities, where people are working on the same subject, collaborating on that and pairing that up. And if it's happening without us having to do it, I'm delighted. Where we can come in, I'm even more delighted to be provided the opportunities or the requests for some agency of government. But I think what is exciting is you've got across this panel things that are happening which I'm not generating.
Yeah. Well, it is neither Swansea nor Sheffield, Dominic. It is the University of Cambridge's Department of Material Science and Metallurgy.
It's not what
29.
Swansea University claim.
Right. It's on page 29. But I think the interesting part was Factory 2050, which is at the University of Sheffield, which is helping create, the next generation Industry 4.0 manufacturing opportunities for Indian companies. And anybody here in manufacturing, ought to look that up. I think coming back to you, Andrew, and you talked about unclustering the landscape for Indian companies. I told you I will come back to you and ask you more. When an Indian company looks at the UK, Manchester or the northern states are not the natural destination, why should that be the case, or what should that be the case for? How is that a different landing spot?
Yeah, and I think part of what our role is unlocking that opportunity and promoting that opportunity that we've got right across the north of the UK. I think one of the key components that is crucial is connectivity. We need international connectivity, and that, as we all know, is absolutely critical to economic growth and unlocking that. And the living bridge that that we keep coming back to, that connectivity internationally is absolutely crucial to that. I think direct connectivity is also really important. So Manchester and the north of the UK has always connected with India, but not necessarily directly. And I think it's the fact that it's now directly connected with the route that we've launched into Mumbai. It reduces travel time. You get access to a wider market more quickly. Senior executives and managers are able to go out over a 2-day trip there and back. Yep. Really efficient use of their time, and I think it drives a better flow of human capital. So I think that's really important. And we've had a really good example in the north. We launched a flight to Beijing in China 2 years ago, and we've just published our second economic impact assessment report, which demonstrates the amount of significant uplift in trade and investment just because we've done that. And I think what we're hoping to happen with India is exactly the same. And I think what's also really important, just coming back to Sir Dominic's point, is the fact that this isn't just about Manchester, this is about the whole of the north. So cities like Liverpool, places like Leeds, Sheffield, Hull, Sunderland, Newcastle, those kind of companies are represented here today on this trade mission that we've been out on all week. And I've got my colleagues here, and part of it is about promoting that story. Manchester alone has 220 international destinations. We're one of the best connected European airports in Europe. And the city you may not know this, but Manchester, the city of Manchester, is one of Europe's largest creative, digital and tech clusters. So we've got lots of real inherent strengths in our region. And there's lots of thriving businesses already there. We've got people like AO.com, Boohoo.com, who have started up, but they've had £1 billion IPOs recently, as well as companies like BBC, Google, Cisco, and IBM. Those kind of companies are already there. And Jim, I'm keen that we talk to you as well. So I think what I would say is that connectivity is fundamental to underpinning and turbocharging the development.
So before I get Jim to pick up on what you said, there is now connectivity between Bombay and Manchester. Are you also looking to expand that beyond Bombay?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the more links we can get, the next one on our hit list is to get a direct route into Delhi. Obviously, there are other places like Bangalore, which are
and
very
what's the sort of time frame?
So, I mean, the gestation period for new routes is quite long. What we want to see is the Mumbai route develop. We want to see it really strengthen. And then we'll be talking to all our airline partners. Part of my week out here, I'm seeing lots of airlines, and we're talking to them about their future plans and how we can work together to. But I think it's about businesses using those routes. It's about people using those routes. It's about people demanding that we've got direct connectivity, and then those routes will then be established. And I think it's only by those routes being successful which we'll be able to build on them.
Yeah, absolutely. For somebody from India who spent time both in Manchester and further up north in Glasgow, I can tell you, you have to think beyond the usual London. Certainly, everybody here must have experienced going into that airport. I'm sure Manchester is a different experience, and we look forward to experiencing that. I think, Jim, do you want to pick up on that?
I do, and I'll just take issue with something you said before, Vishesh, that it's not a natural destination, the north of England, for Indian investors. I mean, for us, I think a majority of our UK employees are actually based in the north of England. I say north of England, I actually mean north of England and Scotland. We have 700 or so employees in Liverpool, we've got another few hundred in Warrington, another 500 or 600, I think, in Manchester. The advantages for us are that there's a great wealth of talent. The universities are excellent. It produces really strong graduates. And I think also the UK isn't just London. It's significantly cheaper to run elements of your business which don't need to be in London from anywhere else in the UK. It also enables us to be a truly UK-wide employer. I'm sure that thousands of my colleagues will be using that direct route from Manchester Airport now.
Right. Felicity, Indian companies or people here who are looking to consider the UK, either expand their business or just look at opportunities. Can the CBI support them across the country? Should they contact you? Should they contact one of your colleagues in India? Is there?
That's fine. Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, I think maybe if I just take a step back on this a little bit, because I've realised that I'm sitting underneath the sign that says collaboration is great right here. And it's one thing when at CBI we spend a lot of time talking to our members about how we can raise innovation in the UK. We're really delighted that the UK government introduced a target on the back of CBI campaigning to spend 2.4% of GDP on R&D. And when it comes to government policy, there are a few silver bullets, but collaboration really is one of the few silver bullets out there that really can help innovation to be more successful. And so the CBI's role in the UK has been very much about helping companies to link up with the kind of government support that enables those collaborations. And so we're very focused on driving R&D, bringing companies together, and increasing international innovation. And it is a really good time to be looking at the UK at the moment. As I say, the government has just introduced this target. There's been a big increase in innovation funding, actually the largest increase in 40 years. And the government's industrial strategy is a really good place to start in terms of links between the two countries. It's looking to solve problems that matter at both ends, things like healthy ageing, things like clean growth, future mobility, AI and big data. They're all themes that we've heard about and talked about earlier. So the CBI can certainly help our members to navigate the UK landscape, and the opportunities for international collaboration really are there. And I think it's something that the UK government is going to be increasingly focused on as we do start to look to the rest of the world.
Right, Kishore, as somebody who has direct experience of operating a manufacturing business in India. Do you feel the ease of doing business in India over the last 3 or 4 years has actually improved? For at least our international guests here, they must have picked up the press, on all the World Bank rankings. India's gone from 142, depends on how you look at the rankings, but somewhere in the 130s, 40s to 77 in the world. That's still not an aspirational place to be for an economy our size, but it is a dramatic change in 4 years in numbers. Does it feel like that on the ground?
Yeah, it's very easy to fall into the trap of giving a politically right answer here on this one. But, to be honest, it depends where we look at. If you look at labor reforms, there are challenges still. If you look at land acquisition, there are challenges still. If you look at the speed at which you can get permits and the speed at which states collaborate with you and the need for the states to do more with companies like us, I think there's been a drastic improvement. And we just formed a JV this year in March in Pune. And as we went through the process, I found that the process was a lot harder in Germany than it was in India in order for us to get this JV set up. And I thought it would be the other way around. And when we met with the bureaucracy in the government or with the politicians in the government, just to tell them that we're doing this, there was so much of energy in them wanting us to do more here. So I see those as positive signs. And definitely in certain areas, when it comes to defense, when it comes to certain tricky issues with people, then those get complicated. So that's where the ease of doing business starts sputtering.
Yeah,
right?
Absolutely. I think that's what the Prime Minister is trying to do, maximum governance, minimum government. I think wherever you got to interact with government, things are still not as easy as they could be. But great to hear that Pune was easier than Germany. I'm sure everybody on the panel is pleased to hear that, not just us. So Dominic, this was launched in April 2018. I'm sure this summit is an annual affair, but there's things that happen between two summits which keep this momentum alive. Could you just leave the audience with what some of that may be? The awards. There's other things that I'm quite happy for others to supplement that so that the audience is aware that this is not a panel and I'll come again to a summit 12 months later to hear more people on an audience. There are many ways to interact and participate in making the most of this. And then I'll get Ben from the CBI to come up and summarize this for us. Let you have the last word.
Thank you. There is a lot. So there's some bits in place, like the clusters, which will have to be developed. And that's building up the ecosystem, building up the collaborations. Thanks, Felicity, for putting out great for collaboration. Remind you of Prime Minister Modi's comment in November 2015 in London, which is an unbeatable combination of UK and India. So there is the clusters. We will be setting up a tech hub here in Delhi, which is designed to facilitate the partnerships both on research and science and innovation, but also between MSMEs on both sides to get that moving. So that's another element. We'll keep doing the really successful things we're doing in terms of startups, entrepreneurships, the Tech Rocket Ships Award, 4th year we're done. Going into fintech, we'll go into other areas for this startup. We're about to set up another fund, startup fund, a joint Indian-UK to add further impetus to that. So there will be those elements to follow up with. It's exploring quite often the new areas that exist. So there's a huge amount in the renewables. There's a huge amount of technology in more established industries like oil and gas, which we'll be exploring over the next, not just the next year, but into the future. There is hardly an area I can look into where we're not going to be together, India and UK, exploring what we might do together. And that will be cross geographies too, in both countries. We talked about the north of England, mentioned briefly Scotland. There is Wales, there is Northern Ireland, also. Each of those, something is going on which is relevant to the agenda. And what Kishore's point, that you've picked it up also, that co-create, that's what the name of the game is going to be, I think, for the next decade. But certainly we'll be putting a lot more into that, looking how we develop that in the next year.
Thank you. Ben, from the CBI, if I may request you to please come up and help us wrap this up.
Well, thank you, Vishesh, and good afternoon, everybody. We are coming to the end of time, so I'm actually not going to attempt to summarize everything that we've talked about. But what I would like to say is just a few words of thanks on behalf of the CBI, first of all, to all of the panelists. I think often when we talk about the trade and investment relationship between the UK and India, we find ourselves in reflective mode, and I think it's important to know where we've come from. But actually what I've really loved about this panel is we've talked about where we're going to go and the future that we have together, whether it's the connectivity and the civic leadership, I think, that Andrew talked about, the innovation that Felicity touched on, and dare I say, the people-to-people links between us with this budding bromance that we have between Jim and Kishore at the end of the panel. So I think that that's really exciting. I'd like to say a particular thank you, Vishesh, to you for your partnership on this piece of work that we've been involved in. I know a collaboration with the CBI in India is not always the easiest thing to convince marketing and PR people to enter into, so thank you very much for doing that. It is Confederation of British Industry, just reassure you about that. But your support and your partnership has been absolutely superb through this process, so thank you very much indeed. So Dominic, can I also just say thank you to you personally, but also to your team. I'd like actually to take the opportunity to say a huge thanks to, I think, to all of the unsung heroes in your team who put together today's event, not just this panel, but the whole session. I think it's a fantastic model that we can use around the world, so thank you very much. And then finally, actually I should say a thank you in his absence to Deepak, who isn't here, but Invest India I know are doing fantastic and hugely valued work for companies taking their first steps in India. But finally, thank you to all of you, and can I recommend that you stay for the next panel with my good friend Priya Gupta from Rocket Space in London. Some of you might not be familiar with Rocket Space, but they are an incredible incubator doing really fantastic work for technology, born in San Francisco, but with a home now in London and hopefully a home soon to be here in India. So please do stay, and thank you very much for listening.
Thank you, Ben. Thank you very much to the panel.